I built my empire from scratch. Now mom, dad, and sister say I owe them payback after they saw me withdraw $50,000 from the bank ATM when they thought I was still unemployed, since I hid my online business for 3 years. My mother's shrill voice cut through the coffee shop like a blade. "You selfish bitch!" Every head turned. She lunged across the table, knocking over my latte, the brown liquid spreading across the white marble like blood at a crime scene. My father's face had gone purple, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were bone white. My sister Vanessa stood behind them, arms crossed, that same smug smile she'd worn since childhood plastered across her surgically enhanced face. "We raised you, fed you, clothed you," she hissed. "That money is ours." The barista had stopped mid-pour. 2 businessmen at the corner table had their phones out, probably recording. I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled a crisp white envelope from my purse and placed it on the table between us, right in the puddle of coffee. Then I smiled. "I am Rebecca Morrison, eldest daughter of Thomas and Patricia Morrison, big sister to Vanessa. Or at least I used to think of myself that way. For 29 years, I believed we were a family. I believed their words when they said they wanted the best for me. I believed my sister when she borrowed my car and returned it with an empty tank. I believed my father when he said real daughters don't question their parents. I believed my mother when she told me I was lucky they didn't kick me out at 18 like other parents do. But that envelope on the table contained something they didn't know I had. 3 years of documentation, bank statements, text messages, recorded phone calls, every single lie they'd told about me to extended family. Every dollar they'd stolen from my childhood savings account that Grandma Morrison had set up before she died. The coffee shop had gone silent except for the hiss of the espresso machine, but none of them reached for the envelope. They were too busy savoring what they thought was my humiliation, too drunk on the power of finally catching me with money they assumed they could take. They had no idea the trap had already closed around them. My online business started small, a drop-shipping store I ran from the basement apartment I'd rented after college. The apartment my parents told everyone I was freeloading in, even though I paid every cent of rent myself. They never asked what I did all day on my laptop. They assumed I was wasting time, applying to jobs I'd never get, living off credit cards that would eventually ruin me. They wanted me to fail. I understood that now. Vanessa had married Rich at 23, a real estate developer named Craig who drove a Tesla and wore Rolex watches. My parents paraded her around like a prize pony. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became my mother's favorite question. At family dinners, they'd seat me at the kids' table even though I was older than Vanessa. They'd forget to save me leftovers. Once, at Thanksgiving, my father told a story about my childhood bedwetting to Craig's entire family while I sat there, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, watching Vanessa laugh so hard she cried. But I smiled through it all. I took notes. I remembered every slight, every cruelty, every calculated humiliation. And I built my empire in the shadows while they congratulated themselves on keeping me humble. The coffee shop manager approached our table nervously. "Excuse me, is everything?" My mother whirled on her. "Mind your business." The manager retreated. My father leaned forward, his breath hot and sour. "You will give us that money, Rebecca. We're your parents. We have rights." I let that word hang in the air, rights, as if biology was a contract I'd signed, obligating me to fund their retirement, their vacations, their new kitchen renovation. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another sale notification. My automation software ran 24 hours a day now, processing orders from 6 different stores across 3 countries. While we sat here in this coffee shop, I'd probably made another $2,000. The number in my business account had 7 digits, but they'd only seen me withdraw $50,000 because I needed cash for the down payment on my new house. A house I was buying under an LLC name they'd never connect to me. A house in a gated community 40 miles away where they'd never find me. "Open the envelope," I said quietly. Vanessa grabbed it first, her acrylic nails tearing through the paper. I watched her face change as she read the first page, a printout of text messages between her and our mother, discussing how to convince Grandma Morrison to change her will before she died. Texts about hiding the original will. Texts about forging my grandmother's signature on documents I'd never seen. My father snatched the papers. His purple face went gray. Page 2 was a bank statement from the children's savings account Grandma had opened for me when I was 5. She'd deposited $50 every month for 13 years, $7,800 total. The account had been emptied when I turned 18, 2 days after my grandmother's funeral. I never saw a cent. I was told there was no account, that Grandma had spent all her money on medical bills. But I'd requested the records 3 months ago, and there it was. My father's signature on the withdrawal slip, Page 3 was even better. Page 3 was a recorded transcript of a phone call between my mother and Aunt Linda, where my mother bragged about taking the insurance money from Grandma's life policy, money that was supposed to be split between me and Vanessa. $25,000 that should have been mine, spent on Vanessa's wedding instead. The wedding where I was told I couldn't bring a +1 because we're keeping it intimate, honey. The wedding where I wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid because Vanessa wanted her friends to look cohesive in photos. My mother's hands were shaking now. Where did you get this? Her voice had lost its sharp edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. Good. She should be afraid. I'd spent 8 months working with a forensic accountant, tracking every dollar they'd stolen from me over the years. The childhood savings, the life insurance, the $3,000 I'd loaned my father for emergency car repairs that somehow paid for their cruise to Alaska. Even the $200 birthday checks from Grandma they'd deposited for me, but never transferred to my account. It totaled $34,716, and that was just the money I could prove. There's more, I said, sliding another envelope across the table. This one was thicker. My father opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were copies of their tax returns for the last 5 years, returns where they'd fraudulently claimed me as a dependent, even though I hadn't lived with them since I was 22. They'd been getting a tax credit for me, pocketing $3,000 a year in refunds they had no legal right to. I'd already sent copies to the IRS with a detailed letter explaining the fraud. The audit notice would arrive at their house in about 2 weeks. Vanessa had gone pale under her spray tan. You can't do this. We're family. That word again. Family. As if it was a magic spell that erased theft, fraud, and years of systematic abuse. As if sharing DNA meant I owed them access to my bank account. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You're right, I said. We are family. And that's exactly why this hurts so much. The businessmen in the corner were definitely recording now, their phones pointed at our table. Perfect. I wanted witnesses. I wanted documentation. When my family tried to spin this story later, and they would, I wanted proof of what happened here. The envelope also contains a cease and desist letter. I continued. You are not to contact me by phone, email, text, or in person. You are not to come to my residence. You are not to speak about me to extended family members. Any violation will result in a restraining order. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. You can't cut us off. What will people think? And there it was. The only thing she'd ever really cared about. Appearances. What would the neighbors say? What would Aunt Linda think? How would this look at church? Not, how could I have hurt my daughter so badly that she never wants to see me again, but what will people think? Actually, I said, picking up my purse, I can cut you off. I'm 29 years old. I don't owe you anything. Not money, not time, not emotional labor, not one more second of pretending we're a happy family. I turned to Vanessa. Enjoy your marriage while it lasts. I heard Craig's company is being investigated for mortgage fraud. Must run in the family. Her jaw dropped. I'd done my research there too. 6 months of digging through public records, connecting dots, building a case. I wasn't going to use that information unless I had to, but I wanted her to know I had it. I wanted her to lie awake at night, wondering what else I knew, what other bombs I was holding, waiting for the right moment to detonate. The coffee shop door felt heavy as I pushed it open. Behind me, I heard my mother start to cry. Not the quiet tears of genuine grief, but the loud, theatrical sobs she used to manipulate people at funerals and family gatherings. The performance was for the other customers, trying to cast herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter. It wouldn't work. The recorded video would show who attacked whom, who screamed, who stayed calm. My hands didn't shake until I was in my car, doors locked, engine running. Then the adrenaline hit me like a tsunami. 3 years of secrecy, of careful planning, of building something they couldn't touch or taint or take from me. It had all led to this moment. The moment I stopped being their victim and became something they didn't have a name for yet. Someone who fought back. Someone who kept receipts. Someone who understood that real power wasn't volume or violence. It was information and timing. I drove to my lawyer's office across town, my phone exploding with texts. First, my mother. How dare you humiliate us in public? Then Vanessa. You've always been jealous of me. Then my father. You're dead to us. I forwarded all of them to my lawyer without responding. More documentation. More evidence. More proof that cutting them off was the healthiest decision I'd ever made. My lawyer, Patricia Chen, was waiting in her office. A slim woman in her 50s with silver hair and the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen every dirty family secret imaginable. "It's done?" Patricia asked, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I nodded, showing her my phone. She scrolled through the texts, her expression never changing. "Good. They're establishing the pattern of harassment. If they continue, we'll have everything we need for the restraining order." She paused, looking up at me. "How do you feel?" How did I feel? Numb, relieved, terrified, powerful, sad in a way that had nothing to do with losing them and everything to do with mourning the family I'd wanted them to be. "I feel like I can finally breathe," I said. And it was true. The weight I'd been carrying for 29 years, the obligation to smile through their cruelty, to accept their theft, to pretend their abuse was normal family dysfunction, it was gone. I'd cut it loose in a coffee shop in front of witnesses, and now there was nothing left but the future I'd built for myself. Patricia smiled. "Then we proceed as planned. The IRS audit will take 6 to 8 months. By then, you'll be in your new house and they'll have no way to find you." I spent that evening in my basement apartment for the last time, packing boxes and wrapping dishes in newspaper. My phone continued buzzing, more texts from my mother, increasingly desperate. "We can talk about this. Don't throw away your family. You'll regret this." Then finally, "We'll forgive you if you apologize." I actually laughed out loud at that one. They'd forgive me. For what? For refusing to be stolen from? For documenting their crimes? For having the audacity to build a successful business without their knowledge or approval? The delusion was breathtaking. I blocked all 3 of their numbers and started a new list in my phone, people who'd shown me genuine love over the years. The list was shorter than I'd hoped, but each name on it mattered. My college roommate Jennifer, who'd lent me money when I was broke and never asked for it back. My neighbor Mrs. Park, who brought me homemade kimchi and never once asked prying questions about my family. My old professor Dr. Williams, who'd written me a reference letter even though I'd dropped out of his program to start my business. These were my people now, not because we shared blood, but because we'd chosen each other. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my mother's sister, Aunt Linda. Subject line, "We need to talk about your behavior." I deleted it without reading. Then another email arrived from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, asking me to reconsider cutting off my parents. The flying monkeys were being deployed, trying to guilt me back into compliance. But I'd anticipated this too. I'd written a single-paragraph statement explaining my decision in clinical, unemotional language. After discovering significant financial fraud and ongoing emotional abuse, I've chosen to cease contact with my immediate family. This decision is final and not open for discussion. I ask that extended family members respect my boundaries and not involve themselves in this situation. I sent it to Aunt Linda, my cousin, and 3 other relatives who'd already started texting me. Then I muted all conversations and went about my day. I had a business to run, a house to move into, a life to live. They didn't get to occupy any more of my mental space. The moving truck arrived at my new house on a Tuesday morning. The house was a 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood, with a porch swing and a fenced backyard, and absolutely no forwarding address filed with the post office. I'd rented a P.O. box across town for any mail that mattered. As far as public records were concerned, Rebecca Morrison still lived in that basement apartment, which I'd paid through the end of the lease before handing the keys to the landlord. I'd disappeared, and it felt glorious. My first night in the new house, I sat on the living room floor surrounded by boxes and ate Chinese takeout straight from the container. No family dinner table. No passive-aggressive comments about my weight. No sister bragging about her husband's promotion while I chewed silently. Just me, my laptop, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd won. Not because I'd hurt them back, though the IRS audit would certainly hurt, but because I'd removed myself from their game entirely. They couldn't steal from me anymore. They couldn't guilt me anymore. They couldn't use me as the family scapegoat anymore. I was free. 3 weeks later, Patricia called with an update. The IRS has initiated a full audit of your parents' returns going back 7 years. They're also investigating possible tax fraud related to the life insurance money from your grandmother's estate. Her voice held a note of satisfaction. Additionally, your father's employer has been notified that he falsified dependent information on his W-4. He could face termination. I should have felt guilty. Good daughters don't destroy their parents' financial lives. Good daughters forgive and forget. Good daughters understand that family is family, no matter what. But I wasn't a good daughter anymore. I was a woman who'd been stolen from, lied about, and systematically devalued for nearly 3 decades, and I was finally extracting a price for all of it. "Thank you, Patricia," I said. "Keep me updated." After I hung up, I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at my backyard. The previous owners had planted roses along the fence, red ones, the color of wine and rage and survival. I hadn't planted those roses. I hadn't earned them through suffering or sacrifice. They were just there, beautiful and thriving, because sometimes good things exist without requiring pain as payment. My business continued to grow. By the end of the month, I'd hired 2 virtual assistants and was launching a 3rd store focused on eco-friendly home goods. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was building an empire centered on creating comfortable, safe homes while systematically dismantling the family that had made my childhood home a war zone. During a video call with one of my suppliers, a woman named Margaret from Portland, she mentioned having recently cut off her own toxic family. "Best decision I ever made," she said. "People don't understand unless they've lived it." She was right. The people who told me to forgive, to give them another chance, to remember that family is forever. They'd never had a mother who stole their inheritance. They'd never had a father who used them as a tax write-off. They'd never had a sister who treated them like an embarrassing secret. Their advice came from a place of privilege. The privilege of having families that weren't fundamentally broken. 2 months after the coffee shop confrontation, I received a letter at my P.O. box. The return address was my parents' house. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page in my mother's handwriting. "Rebecca, we've had time to think about what happened, and we realize we may have been too harsh. If you're willing to sit down and talk, we're open to reconciliation. We miss you. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times, looking for the apology that wasn't there. We may have been too harsh. Not, "We stole from you." Not, "We committed fraud." Not, "We abused you for years." Just a vague acknowledgement that maybe they'd been slightly unreasonable, paired with an expectation that I'd come crawling back. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to Patricia with a caption, "For the files." Then I fed the letter into my paper shredder and watched it turn into confetti. Reconciliation required accountability, and they'd never been capable of that. They wanted access to my money, my success, my ability to make them look good to their friends. They didn't want a relationship. They wanted a resource. The IRS audit concluded 4 months later. My parents owed $37,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. My father's employer had suspended him pending an internal review of his tax withholding fraud. My mother had taken to posting cryptic Facebook statuses about ungrateful children and family betrayal, which only made her look unhinged to anyone who didn't know the full story. Vanessa had gone quiet, too quiet. I suspected she was dealing with her own problems now that Craig's company was under federal investigation for mortgage fraud. Their house of cards was collapsing exactly as I'd planned, and I watched from a distance with the cool satisfaction of an architect surveying a controlled demolition. I'd pressed the button. They'd built the bomb themselves over decades of lies and theft. The explosion was always inevitable once someone finally cared enough to expose the foundation. My new life took shape slowly, carefully. I joined a book club full of women who asked about my work, but never pried into my family situation. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a 3-year-old mutt named Cooper, who followed me from room to room like he couldn't believe his luck. I started therapy with Dr. Reeves, a woman who specialized in family estrangement, and never once suggested I was obligated to forgive people who'd harmed me. "Forgiveness is optional," she said during our 3rd session. "Healing is not." I was healing in ways I hadn't expected. The constant anxiety that had hummed beneath my skin for years, the fear of running into them, the dread of family events, the exhausting mental gymnastics of predicting their moods. It was gone. I slept through the night. I ate meals without a knot in my stomach. I made plans for my future that had nothing to do with managing their expectations or avoiding their criticism. For the first time in my life, I was just Rebecca. Not the disappointing daughter or the jealous sister or the ungrateful child. Just me. 6 months after the coffee shop confrontation, I hit my first $1 million year in revenue. I celebrated alone in my kitchen with a bottle of champagne and a grocery store cake, and it was perfect. No one to minimize my achievement, no one to ask why I hadn't done it sooner, no one to immediately start calculating how much I owed them. Just me and Cooper, and the quiet satisfaction of building something entirely my own. The next day, I donated $10,000 to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, specifying that it should go to students from difficult family situations. The fund administrator called to thank me personally. "This will change someone's life," she said, "more than you know." I thought about 18-year-old Rebecca, desperate to escape, believing her family's lies about her worthlessness. If I couldn't go back and save her, at least I could save someone like her. That was worth more than any apology my parents would never give. The scholarship fund launched in my grandmother's name, Eleanor Morrison Memorial Scholarship for Resilient Students. My parents would eventually hear about it, and they'd realize I'd used Grandma's memory to help strangers instead of honoring family. Perfect. The first recipient was a 19-year-old named Maya Torres, who'd been homeless for 6 months after her parents kicked her out. When I met her at the award ceremony, she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You don't understand what this means," she whispered. But I did understand. I understood exactly what it meant to be discarded by the people who were supposed to protect you, and I understood the power of someone believing you deserved better. My business expanded into Canada and Australia. I hired a full-time operations manager named David Chen, a former corporate burnout who'd left his 6-figure job to find something meaningful. He ran my warehouses with military precision while I focused on strategy and product development. We never discussed our families. That was an unspoken boundary I appreciated. Some people wore their trauma like badges. I preferred to let mine fuel my success quietly, privately, like nuclear energy contained in a reinforced chamber. The explosion had already happened in that coffee shop. Now I was converting the fallout into pure power. Then Vanessa found my business. I don't know how. Maybe she hired a private investigator, or maybe she stumbled across one of my product listings and recognized my design aesthetic. Either way, she left a 1-star review on my main store. Scam. Owner is a liar and fraud. Stole from her own family. Do not trust this business. I stared at the review for a full minute, feeling my heart rate spike. My first instinct was panic. Would this destroy everything I'd built? Then I looked at my other reviews. 4,873 5-star ratings. Vanessa's single star was a grain of sand on a beach. I clicked the Report Review button and selected Personal Attack Contains False Information. Then I called Patricia. "Can she do this legally?" I asked. Patricia's typing sounds came through the phone. "She can post reviews, but defamation is defamation regardless of platform. The claims about theft and fraud are provably false. You're not the one who committed fraud, they are. We can send a cease and desist and demand the review be removed." She paused. "Or we can let it stay up and use it as evidence of continued harassment if we need to file for that restraining order." I thought about it. One bad review couldn't hurt my business significantly, but documentation of harassment, that was valuable. "Let it stay," I said. "Screenshot it for the files." Vanessa had just handed me more ammunition, and she was too stupid to realize it. The review stayed up for 3 days before the platform removed it for violating their terms of service, but I'd already saved multiple screenshots, and Patricia had them notarized and added to our growing file. Vanessa tried again on 2 other platforms, posting similar accusations. Both reviews were removed within 48 hours, and both were documented. She was building my case for me, one impulsive act of revenge at a time. Meanwhile, her own life was unraveling in spectacular fashion. Craig's real estate company collapsed when the federal investigation revealed he'd been running a mortgage fraud scheme that cost investors over $3 million. Their house went into foreclosure. Craig left her for his 23-year-old secretary. A cliche so perfect I almost felt bad for Vanessa. Almost. My mother started showing up at places she thought I might be. The grocery store near my old apartment. The coffee shop where we'd had our confrontation. The mall where I used to shop for clothes. She never found me because I no longer went to any of those places. I deliberately changed every pattern, every routine, every predictable behavior. I shopped at a farmer's market across town. I got my coffee from a drive-thru near my house. I bought clothes online or from boutiques in neighborhoods she'd never think to visit. She was hunting a ghost, and I watched from the security of my invisible new life as she wasted gas money and time searching for someone who no longer existed. Dr. Reeves asked me during a session if I felt guilty about their suffering. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "I feel relieved that I'm not suffering anymore. What they're experiencing now are the natural consequences of their own actions. The IRS audit happened because they committed tax fraud. Vanessa's marriage imploded because she married a criminal. Mom is alone because she drove away the one daughter who might have actually cared for her in old age. I didn't cause any of that. I just stopped enabling them to avoid consequences." Dr. Reeves nodded, writing something in her notebook. "That's a healthy perspective. You're not responsible for managing their emotions or protecting them from reality. My father tried a different approach. He filed a police report claiming I'd stolen $50,000 from them. The detective assigned to the case called me within a week. "Ms. Morrison, I need to ask you some questions about a theft allegation." My stomach dropped, but my voice stayed calm. "Of course. Should I have my attorney present?" There was a pause. "That's your right. But I'll be honest with you. After reviewing your father's statement and the documentation you reportedly showed your family, this seems like a civil dispute rather than a criminal matter. Your father claims you stole money from a joint account, but there's no evidence such an account existed. Do you have documentation proving the money was yours?" I did. Bank statements going back 3 years, business formation documents, tax returns showing my income. I emailed everything to the detective within an hour, along with Patricia's contact information and copies of the evidence we'd compiled of their fraud. The detective called back 2 days later. "Ms. Morrison, I'm closing this case. There's no evidence of theft on your part. However, I've forwarded some of your documentation to our fraud division. They may want to follow up regarding the insurance money and falsified dependent claims. My father's attempt to weaponize law enforcement against me had backfired spectacularly. Now local police were aware of their criminal activity, adding another layer of official scrutiny to the IRS audit they were already drowning in. I almost thanked him for being so predictably stupid. His need to punish me had blinded him to the fact that he was holding a live grenade with the pin already pulled. Business hit $2 million in annual revenue. I moved out of my 3-bedroom craftsman and into a modern farmhouse on 5 acres outside the city, complete with a home office, a guest house I converted into a photography studio for product shoots, and enough distance from neighbors that I never worried about someone recognizing my car. Cooper loved the space, spending hours running through the fields chasing rabbits he never caught. I hired a housekeeper named Rosa who came twice a week and never asked personal questions. My life had become exactly what I'd dreamed of during those years in the basement apartment. Quiet, successful, private, and entirely my own. Then I received an unexpected email from Craig, Vanessa's ex-husband. Subject line, "You were right about everything." I stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. "Rebecca, I know you probably hate me by association, but I need you to know that Vanessa spent our entire marriage talking shit about you. She was obsessed with you. Your supposed failures, your unemployment, your pathetic life. Now I realize she was jealous the whole time. She knew you were building something and she couldn't stand it. I'm sorry for every time I laughed at her stories about you. You deserved better from all of us. For what it's worth, karma got me too. I lost everything because I got greedy. Just like your family got greedy with you. I hope you're doing well. You probably are. You were always smarter than any of us. Craig." I read the email 3 times. An apology from Craig, of all people. The man who'd sat at Thanksgiving dinner and laughed when my father told that bedwetting story. The man who'd called me the family disappointment at Vanessa's wedding rehearsal dinner. Now he saw clearly what he'd been too blinded by Vanessa's beauty and my parents' performance to see before. That I'd been the sane one all along. I didn't respond to his email, but I didn't delete it either. I saved it in a folder labeled Vindication, along with screenshots of Vanessa's deleted reviews, copies of my parents' apologetic letters, and every piece of evidence that proved I'd been right to walk away. Sometimes you need tangible proof that you weren't crazy, that your perception of reality was accurate, that the abuse actually happened. This was mine. The 1-year anniversary of the coffee shop confrontation passed quietly. I marked it by taking myself to an expensive dinner at a restaurant downtown, sitting at the bar with a glass of wine and a perfectly cooked steak, watching the city lights flicker through the window. A man 2 seats down tried to buy me a drink. I politely declined. A woman at a table nearby was crying into her phone, clearly fighting with someone. I felt a distance from that drama, like watching a movie about someone else's life. I'd been that woman once. The one crying, the one fighting, the one drowning in other people's dysfunction. Now I was the woman who ate alone by choice, who had no one to answer to, who went home to a house full of peace instead of chaos. The transformation felt like something out of a myth. The phoenix rising, the butterfly emerging, except there was nothing magical about it, just hard work, boundaries, and the stubborn refusal to keep setting myself on fire to keep them warm. At the 2-year mark, my parents' house went up for sale. Patricia sent me the listing with a brief note. Looks like the audit consequences caught up with them. The asking price was $70,000 less than the market value for that neighborhood. A desperate sale. I looked through the photos online, seeing the living room where I'd been belittled, the kitchen where I'd been excluded from conversations, the basement stairs where I'd once fallen because my father had forgotten to mention he'd left his toolbox on the landing. Every room held a ghost of who I used to be, that small, scared version of myself who believed she deserved their treatment. The house sold within 2 weeks. I tracked the public records and discovered they'd moved into a 2-bedroom apartment across town. The kind of place where the parking lot had more potholes than spaces, and the walls were thin enough to hear neighbors fighting. The fall from their perfect suburban home to this was steep, and they'd made every inch of that descent themselves. My business evolved beyond dropshipping into a full product line of sustainably sourced home goods. I designed everything myself now: minimalist pottery, hand-dyed linens, reclaimed wood furniture. Each piece sold for hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands for the custom furniture orders. I'd become the kind of entrepreneur profiled in magazines, though I always declined interviews. Privacy was worth more than publicity. The less they knew about me, the less they could touch me. I hired 12 employees, all of them working remotely from different states and countries. We had weekly video calls where I saw their faces, their home offices, the lives they'd built around flexible work and fair pay. I paid everyone 20% above market rate because I remembered what it felt like to be broke, to count pennies, to choose between groceries and gas. Vanessa reached out through a fake Instagram account. She'd created a profile under the name Jessica Martin, with a generic profile picture stolen from a stock photo site. She followed my business account and started leaving comments on posts. "Beautiful work. Where are you based?" And, "Do you offer local pickup?" She was fishing for my location, probably hoping to show up and cause a scene. I blocked the account immediately and made a note in my security file. Patricia suggested we might finally have enough for a restraining order. The fake reviews, the fake social media account, my mother's stalking behavior, my father's false police report. "It's a pattern of harassment that any judge would recognize," she said, but I hesitated. A restraining order would require filing in court, which meant they'd get my address through legal proceedings despite protective measures. The irony of needing to expose my location to protect my location wasn't lost on me. Instead, I hired a security consultant named Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent who specialized in helping people disappear from abusive situations. He did a full audit of my digital footprint: business registrations, property records, utility bills, vehicle registration. Within 2 weeks, he'd restructured everything under layers of LLCs and trusts that would take a team of lawyers months to untangle. My name appeared nowhere in public records. The house, the cars, the business accounts, all owned by entities with generic names registered to P.O. boxes in different states. "You're a ghost now," Marcus said with satisfaction. "Unless you tell them where you are, they'll never find you." The peace that knowledge brought was worth every dollar I paid him. I started dating someone, a quiet man named Thomas, who worked as a civil engineer and had his own complicated family history. He understood boundaries in a way that felt natural, never pushing, never prying, never demanding access to parts of my life I wasn't ready to share. On our 5th date, he told me about his alcoholic father and his codependent mother, about going no contact at 25 and never looking back. "People think it's cruel," he said, stabbing at his pasta. "They say things like, 'But they're your parents,' as if that's a magical phrase that erases abuse." I reached across the table and took his hand. "They don't understand what it costs to keep people in your life who are actively destroying it." He looked at me with something like recognition, like he'd finally found someone who spoke his language. We didn't talk about our families again for months, and when we did, it was with the understanding that we'd both made the same difficult choice and neither of us regretted it. My mother found out about the scholarship fund. I don't know how. Maybe she still followed Aunt Linda on Facebook and someone had posted about it. She left a voicemail on my old phone number, which I'd kept active but never checked specifically so she could leave evidence of harassment. A scholarship in Mom's name? How dare you use her memory when you destroyed this family? Grandma would be ashamed of you. I saved the voicemail and sent it to Patricia. The irony was suffocating. My grandmother would have been proud of me for escaping the same trap she'd been caught in her whole life. Grandma Morrison had endured a loveless marriage and raised 2 sons who learned to treat women as servants. She'd whispered to me once when I was 16 and crying over something my father had said, "Be strong enough to leave, Rebecca. Don't end up like me." I'd thought about those words every day for the last 13 years. The scholarship fund gave out its 5th award. A young man named Marcus Chen, who'd been kicked out at 17 for being gay, and had survived 3 years of homelessness while finishing high school. He was heading to college to study social work, wanting to help other LGBTQ youth in crisis. At the award ceremony, he thanked me in front of 200 people, his voice shaking. "Ms. Morrison doesn't know this, but I was planning to drop out before I got this scholarship. I thought I'd never afford college, that I'd always be stuck. This didn't just pay for school, it saved my life." I kept my composure until I got to my car, and then I sobbed for 20 minutes straight. This was what family should have been. People lifting each other up, celebrating each other's survival, making the path easier for those who came behind. This was what my parents could never give me because giving required putting someone else first, and they'd never learned how. Thomas proposed after 18 months. No dramatic public display, no flashy ring. Just the two of us hiking in the mountains, sitting on a boulder overlooking the valley, and him saying, "I want to build a life with you. Whatever that looks like, wherever it goes, I want to do it together." I said yes because he'd never once asked me to reconcile with my family, never suggested I was being too harsh, never implied that my boundaries were anything other than necessary. He'd met them exactly once, accidentally, when my mother ambushed us outside a restaurant she'd somehow discovered I frequented. She'd screamed at me across the parking lot, calling me ungrateful and selfish. Thomas had stepped between us and said in a voice like steel, "You need to leave, now." When she continued screaming, he'd pulled out his phone and started recording. "I'm documenting this harassment. If you don't leave immediately, we're calling the police." She'd left and Thomas had held me while I shook with adrenaline and ancient fear. He never asked me to explain. He just accepted that this was my reality and positioned himself as my defender. We married in a courthouse with 2 friends as witnesses. No reception, no family drama, no risk of someone showing up to object or cause a scene. Afterward, we had dinner at our favorite Thai restaurant and went home to our house. Not my house, our house now. And watched a movie on the couch with Cooper sprawled across both our laps. It was the opposite of Vanessa's elaborate wedding, and it was perfect. Thomas never questioned why I didn't invite my parents. He'd cut off his own family for similar reasons, and we'd built something new together. A family of 2 that felt more stable than any blood relation I'd ever known. We sent announcements to the friends who mattered, and I changed my name legally to Rebecca Morrison Webb, keeping Morrison only as a reminder of the grandmother who'd loved me and the surname I'd built my business reputation on. My father had a heart attack. Aunt Linda called my old number and left a message. "Rebecca, your father is in the hospital. He's asking for you. Whatever happened between you two, he's still your father. Please come." I listened to the voicemail twice, waiting for some surge of emotion. Worry, guilt, grief. Nothing came. Just a distant curiosity about whether he'd survive and a pragmatic calculation about whether his death would finally end my mother's harassment or intensify it. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't call. I did nothing. And the nothingness felt appropriate. He'd been dead to me for 3 years. His physical death, if it came, would just make the reality match the paperwork. Thomas found me sitting in my office, staring at my phone. "You okay?" I nodded. "My father had a heart attack." He sat down next to me. "Do you want to go see him?" I shook my head. I don't owe him my presence just because his heart is failing. He killed any relationship we had long before his body started giving out. Thomas squeezed my hand. "Then don't go. You don't owe anyone your grief or your forgiveness or your time." My father survived. The heart attack was classified as minor, and he was released after 3 days. Aunt Linda sent another message, this one angry. "I can't believe you didn't come. What kind of daughter are you?" I blocked her number and added her to the list of relatives who'd chosen sides without knowing the full story. The list was long now. Cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends who'd heard my parents' version of events and decided I was the villain. Let them think what they wanted. I had financial records, recorded calls, documented theft, and a life so successful it spoke louder than any defense I could mount. The truth didn't require an audience. Business hit $5 million in annual revenue. I opened a physical showroom in Portland, a beautiful space in the Pearl District with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. I hired a manager to run it so I never had to be there personally, maintaining my anonymity even as my brand grew. The showroom became an Instagram sensation, featured in design magazines and home decor blogs. Influencers posed in front of my furniture for photos that got hundreds of thousands of likes. None of them knew who owned the company. The business was called Morrison House, an ironic nod to the family name attached to so much pain, now rebuilt into something beautiful and valuable. I'd taken their name and made it mean something worthwhile. Every sale felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd tried to destroy. Vanessa showed up at the Portland showroom. My manager Sarah called me immediately. "There's a woman here causing a scene. She's demanding to know where you are, saying she's your sister and you stole her inheritance." I could hear Vanessa's voice in the background, shrill and desperate. "I know she owns this place. Tell her to face me like an adult." Sarah had been briefed on the possibility of family showing up. "Do you want me to call the police?" Yes, I did. Tell her she needs to leave immediately, or you'll report her for trespassing. If she refuses, call the police and press charges. Document everything. Sarah handled it perfectly. Vanessa was escorted out by 2 police officers after refusing to leave, and Sarah filed a formal trespass report. I added it to Patricia's file. The harassment documentation was thick enough now to require a binder. We finally filed for the restraining order. The court date was set for 3 months out. Patricia warned me they'd all be there. My parents, probably Vanessa, maybe other family members for support. You'll have to face them, she said. Are you ready for that? I thought about the last 3 years, the peace, the success, the life I'd built entirely without them. I'm ready, I said. They can't hurt me anymore. They have no power over me except what I give them, and I'm done giving them anything. Patricia smiled. Then let's finish this. The restraining order hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in a downtown courthouse with fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. I arrived 30 minutes early with Thomas and Patricia, wearing a navy suit that made me look like I belonged in a boardroom, not a courtroom. Power dressing as armor. My parents were already there, sitting on a bench outside the courtroom with Vanessa between them. My mother had aged a decade in 3 years, gray roots showing in her hair, deep lines around her mouth, cheap clothes from Target instead of her usual Nordstrom. My father looked smaller somehow, deflated, his shoulders curved inward. Vanessa had gained weight and lost the polished sheen that money and a rich husband had provided. They looked like what they were, people who'd hit bottom and found it had a basement. My mother's eyes locked on me. She stood, mouth opening, but Patricia stepped smoothly between us. Don't. You're in a courthouse. Any interaction will be noted. My mother's jaw snapped shut, but the hatred in her eyes could have melted steel. Good. Let her hate me. Hate was honest, at least. It was better than the fake maternal concern she'd performed for years while systematically destroying my confidence and stealing my money. The bailiff called us into the courtroom, a small space with wood paneling and an American flag drooping in the corner. Judge Sandra Martinez presided, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and zero patience for nonsense. I'd researched her. She'd granted 87% of restraining orders in domestic cases last year. Patricia had chosen our court date specifically to land on Judge Martinez's docket. Patricia presented our case methodically. The falsified tax returns presented as Exhibit A. The stolen inheritance money, Exhibit B. The fake Instagram account Vanessa had created, Exhibit C. The fake reviews targeting my business, Exhibit D. My mother's stalking behavior documented through witness statements, Exhibit E. My father's false police report, Exhibit F. The threatening voicemails, Exhibit G through K. The trespass incident at the Portland showroom, Exhibit L. By the time Patricia finished laying out 3 years of harassment, my parents looked like exactly what they were. Abusers who couldn't accept that their victim had escaped. Judge Martinez reviewed each exhibit carefully, her expression growing more severe with each page. My father's attorney, a nervous young public defender who'd clearly been assigned the case that morning, tried to object. Your Honor, this is a family dispute. The respondents are simply trying to reconnect with their daughter. Judge Martinez cut him off. Counselor, I'm looking at documented fraud, theft, stalking, and targeted harassment of a business. This is not a family dispute. This is a pattern of predatory behavior. She turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, do you have anything to say? My father stood, his face red. Your Honor, she's our daughter. We raised her, we fed her, You stole from her, Judge Martinez interrupted. According to these tax documents, you fraudulently claimed her as a dependent for 5 years after she'd moved out, costing the government approximately $15,000 in improper refunds. You also took life insurance money that legally belonged to her. Those aren't opinions. Those are facts documented by the IRS. So I'll ask again. Do you have anything relevant to say? My father sat down heavily. My mother started crying, but they were crocodile tears, performed for the judge's benefit. Judge Martinez didn't even glance her way. Ms. Morrison-Webb, the judge said, turning to me, I'm granting your restraining order. Your parents and sister are prohibited from contacting you by any means. Phone, email, text, social media, in person, or through third parties. They are to stay at least 500 feet away from you, your home, and your place of business. This order is effective for 3 years and can be renewed. Violation of this order is a criminal offense punishable by up to 1 year in jail. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. The whole hearing had taken 23 minutes. 3 years of abuse, documented and presented, judged and resolved in less time than it took to watch a sitcom. I stood on shaking legs, Thomas's hand firm on my lower back. As we walked out, my mother lunged toward me, but the bailiff caught her arm. "Ma'am, the order is effective immediately. Step back." "You're destroying this family," my mother screamed. "You're tearing us apart." I stopped and turned to face her, really face her for the first time in 3 years. "I didn't destroy this family," I said clearly, loudly enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. "You did. Every time you stole from me, every time you lied about me, every time you treated me like I was worthless. You destroyed your own family, and now you're angry that I'm not staying around to watch you pick through the rubble." Security was moving toward us. Patricia pulled my arm gently. "Rebecca, let's go." But I wasn't finished. "I hope it was worth it," I said to my mother. "The money you stole, the satisfaction of making me feel small, the pleasure of having a scapegoat for everything wrong in your lives. I hope it was worth losing a daughter who would have loved you if you'd given her literally anything to love." Then I walked away, Thomas and Patricia on either side of me, through the courthouse doors and into the parking lot where spring sunshine made everything look clean and new. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't get my car keys out of my purse. Thomas took them gently and unlocked the door. "You did it," he said. "It's over." But it wasn't over. Not yet. There was still one more move to make. One final piece of the chess game I'd been playing for 3 years. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus, my security consultant. "I need you to do something for me," I said. Something perfectly legal but absolutely devastating. Marcus met me at my house that evening. I'd spent the afternoon researching, planning, refining the idea that had been growing in my mind since the moment Judge Martinez granted the restraining order. "I want to buy their debt," I said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Explain." I showed him the documents. My parents owed the IRS $37,000. They'd taken out a second mortgage to pay it, borrowing $45,000 from a predatory lender at an 18% interest rate. That loan was now in default. They'd missed 3 payments. The lender would sell that debt to a collections agency for pennies on the dollar just to get it off their books. "I want to buy that debt through an LLC," I said. "And then I want to foreclose on their apartment building." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "That's cold. That's justice," I corrected. "They've spent 3 years trying to take everything from me. I'm going to show them what it actually feels like to lose everything." Marcus made calls. Within 2 weeks, an LLC called Pacific Asset Recovery, owned by a trust that was owned by another trust that eventually traced back to me through 6 layers of corporate structure, purchased my parents' defaulted loan for $8,000. The lender was thrilled to unload it. Pacific Asset Recovery immediately filed foreclosure proceedings on my parents' apartment. They had 30 days to pay the full balance plus penalties and interest, totaling $52,000, or they'd be evicted. They didn't have $52,000. I knew this because I'd seen their bankruptcy filing. Yes, they'd declared bankruptcy, another public record I monitored obsessively. The eviction notice was served on a Monday. I wasn't there to see their faces, but I imagined it. The confusion, the rage, the slow dawning horror as they realized someone was doing to them exactly what they'd done to me, taking shelter and security and grinding them into dust. They had no idea it was me. Pacific Asset Recovery was untraceable, just a name on legal documents. A faceless corporation exercising its legal right to collect on a debt. They probably assumed it was just bad luck, the universe kicking them while they were down. They didn't understand that the universe had my face and my determination and a very long memory. 30 days passed. They didn't pay. Couldn't pay. The sheriff came to enforce the eviction. I watched from my laptop as my mother posted about it on Facebook. "We're being thrown out of our home by a heartless corporation. Please, if anyone can help, we're desperate." The post got 43 sympathy comments and $0 in help. Vanessa moved in with a friend. My parents moved into a motel, one of those weekly rate places with stained carpets and coin-operated everything. I tracked it all through public records and the occasional social media post from relatives who couldn't resist documenting the family drama. My Aunt Linda started a GoFundMe to help them, targeting $5,000. It raised $837 in 6 weeks before she gave up and took it down. No one wanted to fund people who were reaping such obvious consequences of their own actions. Even distant relatives who defended them were starting to see the pattern. The IRS audit, the bankruptcy, the eviction. Bad things didn't happen in this succession to good people. This was karma, and everyone could see it except my parents. 6 months after the eviction, my mother called me from a number I didn't recognize. I'd forgotten to block it, a rare oversight. Her voice on the voicemail was thin, reedy, stripped of all the commanding arrogance I remembered. "Rebecca, it's Mom. I know you probably won't listen to this, but we need help. We're living in a motel. Your father's health is getting worse. Vanessa lost her job. We have nothing. If you ever loved us, if there's any decency in you, please, we're begging. I listened to the message 3 times, waiting for the guilt to arrive. It didn't. What came instead was a cold, crystalline clarity. This was what they'd wanted for me. Dependence, desperation, the erosion of dignity that comes from having nowhere else to turn. They'd spent my entire childhood preparing me for this exact position, teaching me that I deserved nothing, that I should be grateful for scraps. Now they were learning what they'd tried to teach me, and they couldn't handle it. I called Patricia. They violated the restraining order. My mother left a voicemail. Patricia's sigh was audible. Do you want to pursue charges? I thought about it. Criminal charges meant court dates, more confrontations, more of my energy spent on people who'd already taken too much. No, I said, but I want the call documented, and I want to respond once, on the record, so they understand there will never be reconciliation. Patricia drafted a letter that she sent via certified mail to the motel address I'd found in public records. It was brief. Your voicemail constitutes a violation of the restraining order granted by Judge Martinez. Any further contact will result in criminal charges. To be absolutely clear, there will be no financial assistance, no reconciliation, and no relationship of any kind, now or ever. The consequences you are experiencing are the direct result of your choices: fraud, theft, and harassment. You have no one to blame but yourselves. Do not contact me again. Rebecca Morrison Webb. The letter was delivered on a Thursday. My mother called from 3 different numbers that weekend, leaving increasingly hysterical messages. How can you be so cruel? We're your parents. You're going to let us be homeless? I saved every voicemail and forwarded them to Patricia. Monday morning, Patricia filed charges for 3 counts of restraining order violation. My parents were arrested Tuesday afternoon, both charged with misdemeanor harassment. They each spent 24 hours in jail before being released on their own recognizance, with a court date set for the following month. I found out through a Facebook post from a distant cousin. Can't believe Rebecca had her own parents arrested. What kind of monster does that? The comments were split, half agreeing I was a monster, half pointing out that if there was a restraining order, they must have done something to deserve it. The criminal hearing was simpler than the restraining order proceedings. My parents each pleaded guilty to avoid trial, were fined $500 they didn't have, and given suspended sentences with probation. The judge added 2 years to the restraining order, making it a 5-year order total. If you appear before me again for violating this order, Judge Martinez said, we'd gotten lucky with the same judge, you will serve actual jail time. Ms. Morrison Webb has made it clear she wants no contact. Respect that boundary or face the consequences. My father tried to speak. Your Honor, she's our— I don't care, Judge Martinez interrupted. She's an adult who has made her wishes clear. You don't get to override her boundaries just because you're her parents. In fact, being her parents makes your behavior more disturbing, not less. Get out of my courtroom. They left broken. I could see it in the way they walked, shoulders slumped, eyes down. My mother had aged another 5 years and 6 months. She looked 70, not 56. My father shuffled like a man 20 years older, his hands shaking with what might have been Parkinson's or just the physical manifestation of complete defeat. Vanessa wasn't with them. I learned later she'd moved to Arizona with a boyfriend she'd met online, cutting off contact with our parents entirely. Even she'd realized they were anchors dragging everyone down, and she'd finally had the self-preservation instinct to swim away. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vanessa, the golden child, abandoning them while they desperately tried to reconnect with me, the scapegoat. They'd invested everything in the wrong daughter, and now both of us were gone. My business hit $10 million in annual revenue. I expanded into commercial design, working with boutique hotels and high-end restaurants. A hotel chain in Seattle installed my furniture in all 60 rooms of their flagship location. A Michelin-starred restaurant in San Francisco commissioned custom tables and chairs. I hired a PR firm to handle the press that came with success. Carefully curated interviews that never mentioned my personal life. Photo shoots in the showroom instead of my home. A public persona that was warm but impenetrable. The business profile in Architectural Digest mentioned that I was notoriously private and rarely gives interviews. I liked that reputation. It felt like armor. Thomas and I bought a second property. a cabin in the mountains where we spent weekends disconnected from phones and internet. We'd hike during the day and read by the fireplace at night. Cooper sprawled between us on a rug I'd designed myself. Thomas never asked about my family anymore. He understood they were a closed chapter, words on pages I'd ripped out and burned. We talked about building our own family instead. Maybe kids in a few years, maybe foster care or adoption. We wanted to be the kind of parents who gave more than they took, who celebrated instead of competed, who built up instead of tearing down. We wanted to break the cycle that had broken us. One Saturday at the cabin, Thomas looked up from his book and said, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I considered the question seriously. "No," I said finally. "Forgiveness isn't about them. They don't deserve it and wouldn't value it if I gave it. And it's not about me finding peace. I already have peace. I have it because they're not in my life anymore. Forgiveness would be a gift I'm not interested in giving." The scholarship fund gave out its 15th award. A young woman named Sarah Lou, who'd been estranged from her family since 16 and had worked 3 jobs to finish high school. She was heading to college to study business, wanting to start her own company someday. At the ceremony, she found me afterward and said, "I read about your company. I know you started from nothing. That's what I want to do, build something no one can take away from me." I saw myself in her so clearly it hurt. "You will," I told her. "And when you do, remember, you don't owe anyone access to what you build. Not family, not friends who weren't there when you needed them, not anyone who mistakes your success for their opportunity. What you create is yours." She hugged me tightly, and I thought about 18-year-old Rebecca, 22-year-old Rebecca, 26-year-old Rebecca, all those versions of myself who'd needed someone to say exactly those words. I was speaking at a women's entrepreneurship conference when I saw her, my mother, standing at the back of the auditorium. She'd somehow gotten past security, probably by buying a ticket under a fake name. I was mid-sentence, talking about overcoming obstacles, when our eyes met. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked desperate, pleading, like she was begging me to acknowledge her existence. I paused for half a heartbeat, then continued my speech without missing a beat. When the talk ended and I was mobbed by attendees wanting to network, security quietly escorted her out. She didn't resist. Later, the conference organizer apologized profusely. "I don't know how she got in. We'll review our security protocols." I waved it off. "It's fine. She's nothing to me." And that was the truth. She was nothing. A biological fact with no emotional weight, a person who'd given birth to me but never mothered me. The final blow came from an unexpected source. My father's brother, Uncle Robert, reached out through my business email. He'd found it on my website, which didn't violate the restraining order since it was public information. His message was brief. "Rebecca, I know you don't want family contact, but I thought you should know your father is dying. Stage 4 cancer, maybe 6 months left. He's asking for you. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I wanted you to have the information. Robert." I read the email twice, waiting for emotion. Sadness? Relief? Guilt? Nothing came except a mild curiosity about whether I'd feel different once he was actually dead. I showed the email to Thomas. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think he had 29 years to be a decent father," I said. "He doesn't get to use cancer as a redemption card." I didn't respond to Uncle Robert's email. I didn't visit the hospital. I didn't send flowers or cards or empty wishes for comfort. I did nothing, and the nothing felt appropriate. 6 weeks later, another email arrived. "Rebecca, your father passed away yesterday. Funeral is Saturday at Morrison Memorial Chapel. I understand if you don't come, but he asked about you at the end. He said he was sorry. Robert. Sorry at the end. How convenient. Sorry when he was dying and wanted to feel better about his life before leaving it. Sorry when an apology cost him nothing because he'd never have to follow through with changed behavior. Sorry in a way that demanded my forgiveness without earning it." I deleted the email and went back to designing a new line of lighting fixtures. The day of my father's funeral, I went to the office and worked. I designed. I emailed clients. I reviewed quarterly projections that showed we were on track to hit $15 million in revenue by year-end. At lunch, I went to my favorite sandwich shop and ate at a table outside, watching people walk by with their briefcases and strollers and shopping bags, normal people living normal lives, unaware that across town, people were gathering to mourn a man who'd stolen from his own daughter and seen nothing wrong with it. At 3 p.m., roughly when the funeral would be ending, I opened a bottle of champagne in my office. Not to celebrate his death, I wasn't that cold, but to celebrate my freedom from ever having to care about him again. He was gone, and I'd survived him. That was worth marking. My mother tried to contact me one final time after the funeral. She sent a letter to my business P.O. box, technically not a restraining order violation since it was publicly listed. The envelope was thin, Just a single page. Rebecca, your father died asking for you. His last words were your name. How can you live with yourself knowing you denied a dying man his final wish? You're a monster. I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed this family completely. You got what you wanted. We have nothing left. I hope your money keeps you warm at night because you'll die alone, just like you deserve. Mother, I read it once, photographed it for Patricia's file, then fed it into my shredder. The letter told me everything I needed to know. Even in grief, even at the absolute lowest point of her life, she couldn't take responsibility. It was still my fault. I was still the monster. She'd rather believe I'd destroyed the family than accept that she and my father had burned it down themselves. 2 years after my father's death, I got an unexpected letter from Vanessa. Real letter, not email, forwarded from my business address. Her handwriting was messier than I remembered, the words cramped and smudged. Rebecca, I'm writing this from rehab. 4th time here, if you're counting. Craig left me because I'm a drunk. Mom won't talk to me because I told her some truths she didn't want to hear. And I'm broke. I've had a lot of time to think, and I need to say this. You were right about everything. About Mom and Dad, about how they treated you, about the money they stole. I knew about all of it. And I never said anything because I benefited from them making you the scapegoat. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve a response. I just needed you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You weren't the problem. We were. Vanessa. I read the letter 3 times, searching for the manipulation I'd learned to expect from my family. But it wasn't there. This was different. Raw, defeated, real in a way Vanessa had never been before. She wasn't asking for money or forgiveness or reconciliation. She was just confessing, dropping her burden at my feet and walking away. I showed the letter to Dr. Reeves during our monthly maintenance session. How does this make you feel? She asked. Vindicated, I said, and a little sad. Not for who she is now, but for who she could have been if our parents hadn't turned her into their weapon against me. Dr. Reeves nodded. Are you going to respond? I thought about it for a long moment. Maybe. Not now, but maybe someday. If she stays sober and does the actual work of becoming a better person. Not because I need her in my life, but because everyone deserves a chance to break the cycle if they're willing to do the work. My mother died 3 years after my father. Aunt Linda called my business line to tell me she'd learned not to use personal numbers. Rebecca, your mother had a stroke. She's gone. I'm calling because I thought you should know, not because I expect you to care. There was no judgment in her voice. Just tired acceptance. The funeral is Tuesday. I won't be offended if you don't come, but I wanted you to have the information. I thanked her and hung up. Thomas found me sitting in my office, staring out the window at the garden I'd planted last spring, roses and lavender and herbs growing in careful, intentional rows. My mother died, I said. He sat down next to me. How do you feel? How did I feel? Empty. Not in a bad way, just hollow. Like I'd been carrying a weight so long I'd forgotten it was there, and now someone had removed it, and I felt strangely light. I feel like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder, I said. I didn't go to her funeral either. Instead, Thomas and I took a long weekend at the cabin. We hiked 10 miles through mountain meadows filled with wildflowers. We cooked elaborate meals and ate them on the porch at sunset. We made love slowly, tenderly, celebrating life in the face of death. On what would have been the day of her funeral, I planted a tree in the backyard, a Japanese maple with delicate red leaves, not in her memory, but in memory of the daughter I used to be, the one who'd finally grown strong enough to walk away and stay away, the daughter who'd survived them. That daughter deserved a memorial, not them. The business continued growing. 15 million, 20 million. I opened showrooms in New York and Los Angeles, both managed by people I trusted, both designed to maximize beauty and profit without requiring my physical presence. My anonymity remained intact. Articles about Morrison House mentioned the reclusive founder and the mysterious designer behind the brand. I liked being mysterious. It meant I could walk through my own showrooms unrecognized, watching customers run their hands over my furniture, hearing them discuss which pieces they'd buy for their homes. I was building the kind of legacy my parents had tried to prevent. Not just wealth, but something beautiful that would outlast me. The scholarship fund expanded. Instead of 1 award per year, I funded 5, then 10. I hired someone to run it full-time, a woman named Dr. Patricia Okonkwo who'd been estranged from her own family and understood exactly what kind of students we were trying to help. Students who'd survived, students who'd escaped, students who understood that family isn't biology, it's choice. We funded therapy along with tuition, understanding that you can't focus on calculus when you're still processing trauma. We created a mentorship program connecting scholarship recipients with successful adults who'd also survived family estrangement. We built a support network that was everything my family should have been but never was. People lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. I reconnected with Vanessa 5 years after her letter from rehab. She'd stayed sober, gotten a job as a substance abuse counselor, and was living in a modest apartment in Arizona. We met for coffee in a neutral city, Denver, halfway between us geographically and emotionally. She looked different, older, worn down by life, but also clearer somehow. Less polished, but more real. "I don't expect us to be sisters again," she said immediately. "I just wanted to thank you for the letter you sent to my therapist." I'd sent that letter 2 years ago after Dr. Reeves suggested that Vanessa might benefit from my perspective for her own recovery. It was brief, clinical, just facts about the family dynamic and the damage it had caused. "You're welcome," I said. "Are you really sober this time?" She nodded. 4 years. I finally figured out I was drinking because I couldn't live with who Mom and Dad made me become. Once I accepted my role in hurting you, I could start fixing myself. We didn't hug. We didn't make plans to see each other again. But when we parted in that coffee shop parking lot, she said, "You built something incredible, Rebecca. Not just the business, your whole life. I'm proud of you." And I realized those might be the first genuine words she'd ever said to me, words that came with no ulterior motive, no comparison, no hidden barb. "Thank you," I said. "I hope you keep building your life too. The real one, not the performance." She smiled sadly. "That's the plan." I drove away knowing we'd probably never be close, but also knowing she'd finally seen me, actually seen me. And that was enough. Some relationships can't be salvaged, but they can be acknowledged. Sometimes that's the best possible ending. Thomas and I decided against children. We'd fostered 3 teenagers over 5 years, kids from broken homes who needed a safe place to land. We gave them stability, therapy, college funds, and the understanding that they could leave our lives when they were ready without guilt. 2 of them still called regularly, sent Christmas cards, considered us family by choice. The 3rd we hadn't heard from in years, but we hoped she was okay and knew she'd reach out if she needed us. This felt more authentic than creating new humans we'd be genetically obligated to. We were building family intentionally, with people who chose us as much as we chose them. The business crossed $50 million in annual revenue on my 42nd birthday. I celebrated by endowing the scholarship fund with $10 million, enough to fund it in perpetuity. The Eleanor Morrison Memorial Scholarship would survive me, would help kids escape broken families long after I was gone. At the endowment ceremony, Dr. Okonkwo said, "Rebecca Morrison Webb has built something revolutionary. Not just a business empire, but a legacy of liberation. Every student we fund is someone choosing themselves over family obligation. That's radical. That's powerful. That's exactly what Eleanor Morrison would have wanted for her granddaughter." I thought about Grandma Morrison, about that whisper when I was 16, "Be strong enough to leave." I'd been strong enough. I'd left. And I'd built something beautiful from the ashes of what they'd tried to destroy. Now, at 44, I'm writing this from my home office overlooking 5 acres of intentional peace. Cooper is long gone, buried under that Japanese maple, but we have 2 new rescues, older dogs no one else wanted, perfectly content to nap in the sunshine and love us uncritically. Thomas is in his workshop building furniture for our next showroom. The house is quiet except for music drifting through open windows and the sound of my fingers on the keyboard. I'm working on a memoir, not for publication, just for me. A record of how I survived, how I escaped, how I built an empire from the rubble of a family that tried to bury me. People sometimes ask if I regret cutting them off, if I wish I'd tried harder to maintain the relationship. I tell them the truth. I regret nothing. I regret not the restraining order, not the documentation of their fraud, not refusing to visit when they were dying, not missing their funerals. I regret only the years I wasted believing them when they said I was worthless. Every choice I made after that coffee shop confrontation led me here, to peace, success, genuine love, and the kind of freedom most people only dream about. They lost everything because they refused to see me as anything other than a resource to exploit. I gained everything because I finally saw myself as someone worth saving. My mother died believing I was a monster. My father died saying my name like it was a prayer I refused to answer. Vanessa got sober and saw the truth too late to fix what we'd been, but I'm not haunted by any of it. I sleep soundly in my beautiful house, surrounded by things I built with my own hands and money I earned with my own mind. I wake up every morning knowing no one can take this from me because I didn't build it on their foundation. I built it on my own. They taught me what family shouldn't be, and I used that knowledge to create exactly what family should be. People who choose each other, celebrate each other, and lift each other up without keeping score. I won. Not because I destroyed them, though I certainly didn't save them. I won because I saved myself. And every scholarship recipient, every foster kid who stayed in our home, every employee I pay fairly, every customer who fills their home with my designs, they're all part of the family I chose to build instead of the one I was born into. That's my legacy. Not the money, though there's plenty of that. Not the business, though it's successful beyond anything I imagined. My legacy is proving that you can survive people who were supposed to love you but didn't. And you can build something beautiful from that survival. You don't owe them forgiveness. You don't owe them your presence in their dying days. You don't owe them anything except maybe the truth, which is this. They lost, you won, and the scales are finally balanced.